Today we look at the question of the energy trap, okay? Not the geopolitical trap, not the military trap, the energy trap. The one that does not involve a single bullet hitting your body, but will hit your bank account with the force of a financial weapon that no missile defense system on Earth can intercept. Because right now, right at this moment, the bombs dropping in the Middle East are being presented to you as the story. The aircraft carriers, the missile volleys, the satellite imagery. That is what they want you watching. That is the horizontal distraction. And if you are watching it, you are looking at exactly the wrong thing, okay? The real battlefield is not a body of water in the Persian Gulf. The real battlefield is the diesel futures market. And the target is not a military installation or a government building. The target is you. Specifically, your purchasing power, your ability to feed yourself and your family at a price that does not liquidate your savings account by the end of the month. The weapon is not a warhead. The weapon is diesel. And if that sounds absurd to you, if the idea that a fuel commodity is more dangerous than a cruise missile strikes you as exaggeration, then you do not yet understand the mathematics of how you stay alive. Does that make sense? Let me show you. 3 phases, 3 stages of a trap that is already being set. Phase 1, the Diesel Chokehold. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow passage of water between Iran and the Arabian Peninsula. At its narrowest, it is approximately 21 miles wide. The shipping lanes, the actual navigable channels that tankers use, are even narrower, 2 miles wide in each direction, separated by a 2-mile buffer. This is the corridor through which roughly 20% of the world's oil supply transits every single day. Not annually, daily. Approximately 20 to 21 million barrels per day pass through this strait, right? Now, there is no alternative. This is the part that most people do not internalize. You cannot reroute this oil. Saudi Arabia has limited pipeline capacity that bypasses the strait. The east-west pipeline can handle a fraction of the total flow. The UAE has a pipeline to Fujairah that bypasses Hormuz. But again, its capacity is a fraction of what transits by sea. There is no infrastructure on Earth that can replace the Strait of Hormuz at scale in the short term. It is not a bottleneck that can be widened. It is a choke point that can only be open or closed. And Iran sits on one side of it, with the demonstrated capability to make transit either impossible or economically irrational through mining, anti-ship missile coverage, drone swarms, and fast attack craft. Okay? When the strait is threatened, not even closed, merely credibly threatened crude oil prices spike on the futures market within hours. This is well established. We have seen it repeatedly. But here is where the analysis on your television stops and where the real analysis begins. The crude price spike is the headline. The diesel refining bottleneck is the weapon. Crude oil is not diesel. Crude must be refined. And global refining capacity is not elastic. It is fixed infrastructure distillation columns, cracking units, hydrotreatment systems that operates at near maximum capacity under normal conditions. There is almost no spare refining margin in the global system. When crude supply is disrupted, refineries do not simply process less crude at the same efficiency. They face input shortages that cascade through their operations. Diesel output drops not linearly, but disproportionately, because diesel is the product of specific refining processes that cannot be easily substituted or accelerated. The crude shortage becomes a diesel shortage that is worse, proportionally worse than the crude headline suggests. Does that make sense? And diesel is not gasoline. I need you to understand this distinction, because the media conflates them constantly, and the conflation hides the severity. Gasoline powers your commute. Diesel powers civilization. Every combine harvester that cuts grain runs on diesel. Every cargo ship that moves containers across oceans runs on diesel or its marine equivalent. Every freight train that hauls commodities runs on diesel. Every long-haul truck that delivers food from distribution center to grocery store runs on diesel. Every refrigerated trailer that keeps perishables alive in transit runs on diesel. The entire physical supply chain from seed to shelf is a diesel-powered machine. There is no alternative at scale. Not electric, not hydrogen, not natural gas, not yet, not for years. The machine runs on diesel or it does not run, right? Phase 2, the supply chain multiplier. Now let me show you the math that should terrify you. Because the diesel chokehold is not a one-to-one pass-through. It is a multiplier. And the multiplication is what transforms an energy disruption into a food crisis. Take a loaf of bread. Follow it backward through the supply chain. The wheat was planted using diesel-powered equipment. It was fertilized using products derived from natural gas, another hydrocarbon that reprices when energy markets destabilize. It was harvested by a diesel combine. It was transported to a grain elevator by a diesel truck. It was moved to a flour mill by a diesel train. The mill itself operates on electricity, much of which, depending on the region, is generated by natural gas or diesel. The flour was transported to a bakery by a diesel truck. The bread was baked, packaged, and transported again by diesel truck to a distribution center. And from the distribution center, it was loaded onto another diesel truck and delivered to your local grocery store. Okay? Count the diesel touch points. I count a minimum of 7 distinct stages where diesel cost directly determines the cost of moving that single loaf from field to shelf. And here's the critical mathematical principle. The cost compounds at each stage. It does not simply add. When diesel doubles, the farmer's fuel cost doubles. But the farmer also faces higher fertilizer costs because fertilizer is a hydrocarbon derivative. So the farmer's total input cost more than doubles. The farmer passes this cost to the grain elevator. The grain elevator passes it to the mill, adding their own increased transport cost. The mill passes it to the bakery, adding their increased energy cost. The bakery passes it to the distributor. The distributor passes it to the retailer. At each node, the increased cost from the previous node is absorbed and then amplified by that node's own increased diesel expenditure. Does that make sense? This is the supply chain multiplier. A doubling of diesel price does not double the price of bread. It approximately triples it. In some supply chains with more transport nodes, fresh produce, refrigerated goods, imported food, the multiplier is even higher. And this is not theoretical. We have observed this effect during every significant energy disruption of the last 50 years. The consumer price increase for food always exceeds the underlying energy price increase by a factor that reflects the compounding logistical chain, right? And here is the variable that makes this a trap rather than merely a hardship. Food is an inelastic good. You cannot choose not to eat. You cannot defer your caloric intake until prices normalize. You cannot substitute your way out of the basic biological requirement for sustenance. When discretionary goods become expensive, consumers stop buying them. When food becomes expensive, consumers have no choice. They pay. They pay whatever the price is because the alternative is starvation. And when you are forced to pay when demand is perfectly inelastic, the pricing power shifts entirely to the supply side. The consumer has zero leverage, zero negotiating position, zero ability to resist the extraction. You will pay $15 for bread if that is what bread costs, because you must eat, okay? This is the energy tax. It is not legislated, it is not voted on, it does not appear on any government form, but it is the most efficient tax ever designed because it has a 100% compliance rate. Every human being who requires calories to survive pays it. There is no exemption. There is no deduction. There is no shelter. The energy tax is levied at the choke point, the Strait of Hormuz, and collected at the grocery store. And the distance between those 2 points is filled with a diesel-powered supply chain that multiplies the extraction at every stage. Does that make sense? Phase 3, the elite arbitrage. And now the phase that completes the trap. Because the energy tax does not simply evaporate. It does not disappear into the ether. It goes somewhere. And where it goes is the part of the equation that the broadcast game is specifically designed to prevent you from examining. When diesel prices spike, the immediate beneficiaries are the holders of energy futures, not retail consumers who filled their gas tank yesterday. Institutional investors, commodity funds, sovereign wealth vehicles, energy conglomerates. These entities hold long positions in crude oil and diesel futures contracts that give them the right to buy energy at pre-disruption prices and sell at post-disruption prices. The spread between those two prices, the differential created by the chokehold, is their profit. And that profit is enormous. We are not talking about percentage points. We are talking about multiples, right? Now, the critical question is timing. When were those futures positions acquired? Because if an institutional investor bought crude oil futures at $70 a barrel 3 months before a Hormuz disruption sends the spot price to $150, they have more than doubled their money. And the question of whether that timing was coincidental or informed is a question that the regulatory framework is structurally incapable of answering. Not because regulators are incompetent, but because the information asymmetry is built into the system. Institutional investors have access to geopolitical intelligence, satellite data, shipping analytics, diplomatic back channels, and risk modeling that is simply unavailable to the retail participant. They do not need insider information in the illegal sense. They have structural informational advantage that produces the same result through legal means. Okay? So let me describe the complete flow. The choke point closes, or is credibly threatened. Crude spikes. Diesel spikes, disproportionately due to refining bottlenecks. The supply chain multiplier amplifies the diesel spike into a food price explosion. The consumer, the working and middle class, has no choice but to pay because food demand is perfectly inelastic. Their savings are drained. Their disposable income evaporates. Their financial reserves, if they had any, are liquidated to cover the basic cost of survival. This is the extraction from the bottom. Does that make sense? Simultaneously, the institutional holders of energy futures capture the spike. Their positions appreciate by multiples. Their portfolios swell. And because they are sophisticated actors with diversified holdings, they use the profits from the energy trade to acquire additional hard assets, real estate, agricultural land, infrastructure that are being sold at distressed prices by the very middle-class families being liquidated by the energy tax. The worker sells their second property to cover grocery bills. The fund buys it at a discount. The worker depletes their retirement account. The fund captures the premium on the energy trade that caused the depletion, right? This is panic arbitrage at the systemic level. The panic is not an accident. The panic is the product. The choke point creates the energy spike. The energy spike creates the food price explosion. The food price explosion creates the middle class liquidation. The liquidation creates the distressed asset sale. The distressed asset sale creates the institutional buying opportunity. Every stage of the sequence transfers wealth upward. From the person paying $15 for bread to the institution that bought diesel futures at pre-crisis prices. From the family selling their home to cover expenses to the fund acquiring that home at 60 cents on the dollar. The energy trap is not a disruption. It is a pipeline. And the pipeline flows in one direction. Upward. Always upward. Okay? And the broadcast game ensures that this pipeline is never visible to the people being drained by it. The television shows you aircraft carriers. It shows you missile interceptions. It shows you generals and diplomats and press briefings. It does not show you the commodity trading desks. It does not show you the futures positions being accumulated in the weeks before escalation. It does not show you the spread between what the institution paid for diesel futures and what you are now paying for bread. The horizontal distraction consumes your attention. The vertical extraction consumes your wealth. And these two operations are not coincidental. They are synchronized. The distraction enables the extraction. The extraction funds the distraction. The cycle is self-sustaining. Does that make sense? So, the summary. Phase 1, the Diesel Chokehold. The Strait of Hormuz is an irreplaceable transit point for 20% of global oil. Its disruption creates a crude shortage that becomes a disproportionate diesel shortage due to refining capacity constraints. Diesel is the sole fuel of the physical supply chain. No diesel, no movement. No movement, no food. Phase 2, the supply chain multiplier. Diesel cost increases compound at every node of the food supply chain. Planting, harvesting, processing, transporting, distributing, delivering. A doubling of diesel price produces a tripling or greater increase in consumer food cost. Food demand is perfectly inelastic. The consumer cannot refuse. The energy tax has a 100% compliance rate. Phase 3, the elite arbitrage. Institutional holders of energy futures capture the price spike as profit. The resulting middle-class liquidation, savings depletion, asset sales, financial capitulation creates discounted acquisition opportunities for the same institutional class. Wealth transfers upward through a pipeline that begins at the choke point and terminates in the portfolio. The blockade is not a military strategy. It is a financial mechanism. Its purpose is not to sink ships or conquer territory. Its purpose is to activate the diesel chokehold, trigger the supply chain multiplier, and open the arbitrage window through which your accumulated wealth is transferred to the institutional class that was positioned for the disruption before you knew it was coming. The weapon is not a missile. The weapon is the price of diesel. And you cannot intercept a price. That is the lecture. If you found it useful, subscribe.